The date is June 15th, 2004. Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal have walked off a court in the NBA Finals in defeat. Despite Shaq averaging 26 points and 10 rebounds that series, they had still come up short. Kobe, on the other hand, had averaged a low, by his standards, 21 points a game, shooting a horrible 38% from the field. This Lakers team, on paper, should have won. This team had 4 Hall of Famers, and we will get into that. But this team was upset in one of the greatest stories, in my opinion, in NBA history. The Lakers were upset by a ragged Pistons squad, a band of misfits where not one player averaged more than 20 points per game that season. I think this is one of the most underrated comeback stories throughout the entirety of NBA history. For one simple reason. It wasn't even close. So let's get into it. Let's find out what happened in the 2004 NBA Championship. Roll the intro.
I don't really have a good intro right now, but on this channel I like to talk sports.
So the first episode of this is going to be about the construction of the team that eventually won, the 04 Pistons, because let's be real, we know about the Lakers of this era way more than we do the Pistons. That's just how it is, three-peats and whatnot. So yeah, let's get into it. At the end of the 98-99 season, Detroit legend Joe Dumars would walk off the court for the final time. He would retire a 2-time champion, a 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-Defensive Team selection, and 1-time Finals MVP. However though, his retirement would not be a long one. In the year of 2000, Detroit would hire him as their new general manager. The team that he was inheriting was not a fantastic one. After starting 28-30 in the previous season, they had fired their head coach, Alvin Gentry. Their replacement, George Irvine, had guided the team to a 14-10 run and a 42-40 record, which was good for the 7th seed in the East. The team, led by Grant Hill and Jerry Stackhouse, would be swept in the first round by the Miami. As the offseason approached though, one thing became very clear. Grant Hill would be gone. He in fact told the team that he would be signing with the Orlando Magic in the offseason. However, Detroit wouldn't lose him for nothing. Hill would agree to a sign-and trade. This is where the first domino would fall. In exchange for Hill, the Magic would send back Chucky Atkins, who was a 5'11", 26-year-old point guard who till that point had only played 2 years in the NBA. The other throw-in in the deal would be Ben Wallace, a 6'9" undrafted center who had started at power forward for the Magic in the previous year. However, Detroit would move him back to his natural position at the 5. The Pistons would go 30-52 in 2000. It was headlined by Jerry Stackhouse averaging about 29 points per game, his average being bumped up by an incredible run at the end of the season. Wallace would also turn into a defensive and glass-cleaning stalwart, averaging 13.5 rebounds and 2.3 blocks a game that season. However, this was not enough for George Irvine to keep his job. He would be fired in the upcoming season, to be replaced by Rick Carlisle as the new head man of the team. In the draft of that year, they would also select Mateen Cleaves and Brian Cardinal. Both would see very little playing time. 2001 would be a very successful year for the team. They would go 50-32 in the regular season, which was good for the 2nd seed in the East, and won the Central Division. Stackhouse would hold down the scoring, averaging 21 points a game, as well as Clifford Robinson averaging 14.5, and Chucky Atkins with 12.5. Ben Wallace's defensive dominance would continue, which ended in a Defensive Player of the Year award, as he had averaged 3.5 blocks, almost 2 steals, and 13 rebounds a game. This was the first Defensive Player of the Year that Wallace would win, out of 4 in his career. Rick Carlisle would also win Coach of the Year at the end of the season. The team would go on to beat Toronto 3-2 in the first round of the playoffs. This would be the first playoff series that the Pistons had won since 1991. However, in the conference semifinals, they would be gentlemen swept by the Boston Celtics. Despite that, this was an incredibly successful year for the team. This was a great core to build off of, and Dumars did just that. In the draft, Detroit had the 23rd pick. They would use it on Tayshaun Prince, a forward out of the University of Kentucky. While he didn't see many minutes in his rookie year, Prince would become an integral part of the team to come. Another notable draft pick of theirs was Mehmet Okur, who was a Turkish big man known for his floor spacing ability. However, most of his success would not come with Detroit, but with Utah. Later on in the offseason, to reinforce their point guard position, they would sign Chauncey Billups, Mr. Big Shot himself. Then, in September, they would make another blockbuster move. Dumars would trade Jerry Stackhouse, Brian Cardinal, and Ratko Varda to the Wizards in exchange for Bobby Simmons, Hubert Davis, and shooting guard Richard "Rip" Hamilton, fresh off of a season where he averaged 20 points a game. 2002 would be another great year for the Pistons on the court. They would win 52 games again. Ben Wallace would win his second DPOY with 3.5 blocks and 1.4 steals a game. He would also tack on 15 rebounds a game during that span. Rip Hamilton would lead the team in scoring with 19 points a game, and Chauncey Billups would average 16 right behind it. Their 52-30 record was enough to clinch the first seed in the East, and Dumars would go ahead and win Executive of the Year. In the first round of the 02 playoffs, the Pistons would face, ironically, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, and the Orlando Magic. They would go down 3-1, and after a dominant performance in Game 4, McGrady would infamously declare that, quote, "it feels good to be in the second round." After that, the Pistons would go on a major run, winning the series in 7 games. In the second round, they would face Allen Iverson and the Sixers. Despite another heroic series from AI, they were no match for the Pistons, who won 4-2. The Pistons would then make their way to the Eastern Conference Finals. This is where their season came to an inglorious end, being swept by the New Jersey Nets, their season coming to an official close after a 20-point loss in Game 4. Despite that, this season was still a massive success for them. Their offense was respectable, their defense was elite, which made it all the more shocking when Rick Carlisle was fired after the season. This is still one of the most baffling firings of a coach in NBA history. Back-to-back 52-win seasons, plus a Coach of the Year award and a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals in only his second year with the team, and boom, he's gone like that. I don't think the truth will ever really be known. It's probably only known to Carlisle and Dumars themselves. Either way, though, they would go into the season with a new head coach. That new head coach would be Larry Brown, who had recently been fired himself by the Sixers. Brown was a great defensive coach, and that would take their defense to new heights, some that would never be seen before. In the draft, though, due to acquiring the second overall pick in a previous trade, they would select Darko Milicic above Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade. Yep, still one of the greatest busts in recent memory. Anyways, they would go into the regular season their same old selves mostly. Their offense was okay to below average, but their defense was a brick wall again. With Ben Wallace being Ben Wallace, Tayshaun Prince's athleticism making him a pest on the wing, and Billups and Hamilton being both respectable defenders in their own right, this team was a wall. However, there was one big hole: power forward. Power forward had been a weakness for the team going into the year and throughout the year. A revolving lineup of Corliss Williamson, Eldon Campbell, and even for a few games Mehmet Okur had tried to hold down the position, but to little avail. Halfway through February, the team was 34-22. And with the trade deadline fast approaching, they knew they had to make a move. They needed a player that could fill in a role offensively, but also not let the defense drop off too much. That player would be Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed Wallace was in a limbo at the time. He had just recently been traded from the Trailblazers to the Atlanta Hawks. Sheed's time in Portland was marred by off-the-court issues, as it was with the whole team during that time, the infamously nicknamed Jailblazers era. Dumars, though, was not looking for that. He was looking for the competitiveness, the outspokenness, the defense, and floor-stretching ability that Sheed would provide to a team. Dumars had actually tried to trade for him 2 years earlier, but they couldn't agree on a deal. Now, though, he was his guy, even though his contract would expire at the end of the year, thus Atlanta's willingness to trade him. After only one game with the Hawks, where he scored 20 points, Rasheed Wallace, along with Mike James, would be traded to the Pistons as part of a 3-team deal. The Pistons would send Chucky Atkins, Lindsey Hunter, and a first-round pick to Boston, while sending Bob Sura, Zeljko Rabacha, and a first-round pick to Atlanta. To make the salaries work, Boston would also send the Hawks forward Chris Mills. After the trade, the other Wallace on the team, making up the second part of the affectionately nicknamed Wallace Towers, would average 13 points and 7 rebounds, but his defense would be very felt from the get-go. The Pistons would go on a 20-6 run to finish the season, and go into the playoffs 54-28, the 3rd seed in the East. Wallace would have another incredible season: 3 blocks, almost 2 steals, and 12.4 rebounds a game. However, he would lose out on DPOY to Indiana's Ron Artest. This team would finish the year 18th in offensive rating and 2nd in defensive rating in the league. The Pistons would begin their playoff run against the 6th-seeded Milwaukee Bucks and a young but prolific scorer in Michael Redd. The Pistons would win Game 1, drop Game 2, but then win 3 straight to close out the series 4-1. And then there was the legendary second-round performance against the New Jersey Nets. The Pistons would win Game 1, 78-56, Game 2, 95-80. Then the Nets would win the next 3 straight games, 82-64, 94-79, and a 127-120 triple overtime duel. In that Game 5, though, overtime would be forced by Chauncey Billups, who scored a game-tying buzzer beater from half court, which of course helped to build up his nickname of Mr. Big Shot. The Pistons would win 81-75 in Game 6, forcing a fight to the finish Game 7. Detroit would win 90-69 and head on to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers. This Pacers team was very good. They were the first seed in the East at 61-21. Being led by Jermaine O'Neal, who averaged 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game. Ron Artest won Defensive Player of the Year that season, averaging 2 steals and a block a game, along with 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. A young Al Harrington averaged 13 points and 6 assists a game, and a very, very old Reggie Miller, he was 38 at the time, still averaged 40% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. The Pacers finished with the 9th best offense and 3rd best defense in the league that season. It should be mentioned too, however, that these teams absolutely hated each other. Both played in the same division, Central Division, both were gritty, physical, and liked to talk trash. This, of course, would lead to the infamous Malice at the Palace 1 year later. The series would begin with a Detroit loss, 78-74. The last 3 points for Indiana came from a clutch 3 from Reggie Miller, who led the team in scoring with 21 points that game. Game 2, they would win, 72-67, and Game 3, they would win, 85-78. Indiana would win Game 4, 83-68, then Detroit would win Game 5, 83-65, and would close it out in Game 6 with a 69-65 defensive slugfest. Detroit would be representing the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, going up against a foe that they were not favored against, a far bigger foe, a far badder-looking foe, and a far flashier foe, the Lakers. But that will be reserved for Part 2. I'd like to thank you all for watching. This is Part 1 of assumedly 3. I don't know how long these videos are going to be, but I don't care. So yeah, that's about it. Tune in for Part 2 next time, and for now, I'm out. Deuces.